Democrats. It is so great to be together for the second installment of We Got a Plan for That series. Warren Democrats is hosting this series of conversations between endorsed candidates about important policies and plans that really go to the heart of the movement for big structural change. I'm getting in this fight for candidates up and down the ballot who are running on policies and platforms that we need in order to push our country forward. You know, the way I see it, nobody makes it on their own. So I'm not just getting in the fight, I'm inviting everyone on this call to get more involved by volunteering for candidates in their state to help them win. So let me start out by just getting straight to the point. We know that this is a moment of crisis for our nation. A global pandemic, an economy that's being squeezed to the breaking point, and protests against racial injustice that demand bold action. As a nation, we've got a lot of soul searching to do about systemic racism and a lot of changes we need to make. Today, we're going to discuss the need for changes in policing and changes in our criminal justice system. The racial violence that killed George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor is not new in America. And what's captured on video represents only a fraction of the violence that Black Americans experience, some of it while in police custody. So let's face it, there is no one and done solution to the systemic racism embedded in our policing and our criminal justice system. We need real federal muscle for accountability. So here are some of the ways we can start. In the Senate, Ed Markey and I have proposed an end to qualified immunity. And I've worked with Senators Durbin and Hirono to strengthen federal and state government's ability to investigate police departments with a pattern and practice of unconstitutional and discriminatory behavior. Alongside Representative Ayanna Pressley, I've also put forward a bill to hold police officers criminally liable for denying medical care to people who are in custody. And I support the Justice in Policing Act that's led by Senators Cory Booker and Kamala Harris and the Congressional Black Caucus. It would demilitarize the police, ban chokeholds, establish federal standards of force, and a whole lot more. But state and local elected officials also have a powerful role to play in reimagining public safety. Every single elected official, from members of Congress to mayors and governors to district attorneys, must be working to reform our criminal justice and policing systems at the federal, the state, and the local levels. And that's why it's so important to elect candidates that are ready to tackle these challenges head on. So tonight, Warren Democrats is proud to endorse this slate of candidates who understand the importance of changing our country's approach to criminal justice and who have plans for how their states can meet this moment. These candidates need your help to cross the finish line in November. So I hope that you'll learn more about all of them and about all of our Warren Democratic candidates at elizabethwarren.com/endorsements. If you go there, you can find a candidate in your state, you can get involved in a campaign you care about, and you can donate to help them win. But before we meet today's candidates, we have a very special guest who is joining me to help me lead this call. My good friend, Julian Castro, put a spotlight on this urgent topic during his campaign for president. And so tonight, he's here to discuss it with us. Hello, Julian.
Hello, Senator. It's great to be with you.
Good to see you.
To be on tonight. It's good to see you again, and especially a treat to get to chat with some fantastic candidates. I wanted to thank you and Warren Democrats for your leadership on this issue. Tonight, we're talking about such an important issue where there's tremendous yearning for change out there, whether it's on the streets or in city halls or state legislatures or in the halls of Congress, as you mentioned, where significant legislation has moved forward. And there's there is a hopefulness about the ability to get something done in Washington because of your leadership, the leadership of Senator Booker and Senator Harris and others who have been great on this issue. During the campaign, the issue of police violence and how we can ensure that no matter who you are, no matter the color of your skin, you're treated the same by law enforcement was an issue close to my heart. And what I want is an America, like I'm sure you do, where nobody has to drive in their car or walk in their neighborhood afraid that they might be stopped unnecessarily or unreasonably, or arrested, or treated with excessive force. And there are reforms that we can make, many of them that you mentioned, so that we can ensure that we have that kind of America. And I'm glad to be with you and our great candidates that we've also endorsed from People First, because they're that fantastic. We'll find out why. Because we know, and you and I agree, that when it comes to actually getting something done, we need to elect people who are going to have the courage and the vision to cast that vote and to put forward that legislation at their city hall, in their state legislature, or in Congress. And those are the folks that we're going to talk to tonight.
So that's fantastic, Julian. You know, your new group, People First Future, has had some recent victories in Texas. I think that's fabulous, you know, that you have endorsed Candace Valenzuela, and she won, and José Garza, who also won and who's with us here tonight. So let's find out who's here. Okay, today we're joined by three people that People First Future and Warren Democrats have endorsed, and they are committed to the fight to end police brutality and reform our criminal justice system. So we're going to chat with them in just a minute. As you've been watching this, Black Lives Matter protests all across the country, which are still going strong today. Let's talk about, what do you see as the role of elected representatives right now in this fight for justice? How do you see it, Julian?
Well, I think that at every level, our elected representatives have an opportunity to make meaningful change. And let's take a level where there's a lot of action, which is the local level on city councils, or if you're a mayor. Right now, the budget season is coming up. A lot of fiscal budgets start on September 1 or October 1. That means that right now, cities are debating what they're going to fund. There's been calls for additional investment in things like mental health services and housing opportunity and social workers to perhaps better address a lot of the needs that exist out there, because we know that out there in our country, too oftentimes we ask police officers to respond to somebody who's homeless or somebody with a mental health issue that is not violent, oftentimes is not violating any major law. You know, some cities have criminalized homelessness, unfortunately, but we can handle these situations better. So in the budget season, you know, what are you doing if you're a city council member or mayor to address that? Same thing with police union contracts. There's an opportunity to institute significant reforms there on accountability, on transparency at the state legislature level. Colorado just passed a bill that mirrors a lot of what was in the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act that you mentioned at the federal level, banning qualified immunity, banning chokeholds, creating more transparency. And I'm excited that we have candidates running for district attorney, as well as state attorney, because there's a lot of opportunity at that local and state level to make these changes.
That's terrific. So how about if we get started? You want to introduce our candidates that we've got here, Julian?
Yeah, so we have with us José Garza, who is running for Travis County District Attorney, George Gascón, who's running for Los Angeles County District Attorney, and Kim Foxx, who is running for re-election as the state attorney in Illinois. And I'm going to start off with a question for Kim Foxx, if I can. First of all, thank y'all all for joining us. I know how busy everybody is. especially right now in the middle of election season. But this is a great conversation to have. So, Kim, I just wanted to start with you. You're running for re-election as the state's attorney for Cook County, Illinois. Tell us, for folks that may not be familiar with this, what a state attorney does and what role a state attorney plays in the criminal justice system.
Well, thank you. First and foremost, thank you, Secretary, and thank you, Senator, for pulling this panel together. I have so much admiration and respect for the both of you and your work, elevating the need for criminal justice reform, not just in the last couple of months, but as part of your ongoing campaigns. And so I'm honored to be here, and particularly with the other candidates that you have tonight. I am the state's attorney for Cook County, which is state's attorney is another way of saying district attorney. And Cook County is home to the city of Chicago and its surrounding suburbs. What a district attorney or state's attorney does is, in essence, they're the gatekeepers of the criminal justice system. Many people know about criminal law from watching Law and Order. And so I'd like to remind people, in the beginning of the show, there is a crime that's happened and the detectives are trying to figure out who did it. And once they've decided that they know who've done it, they bring it to the prosecutors to then take the case to court, to present the case before a judge or a jury. And we're the gatekeepers in that in most jurisdictions, a case doesn't get before a judge unless the prosecutor says so. So the prosecutor has the power to charge, and just as importantly, the power not to charge. When you talk about criminalizing certain behaviors, it is the prosecutor who is the vehicle by which they make those determinations to charge someone with something perhaps they shouldn't. It is the prosecutor who makes offers and plea bargains, or recommendations for sentences, or recommendations for bail. When we look at over-incarceration rates, it is a lot of it driven by prosecutorial priorities and decision makings and discretion that they have along the way. And so for many people in this conversation around criminal justice reform, they have neglected for far too long the power of the prosecutor. And it's why races like this are so vitally important, because it is that prosecutor who decides whether or not to charge the police officer who has his knee in the neck of George Floyd, or here in Cook County, the police officer who shot Laquan McDonald 16 times as he lay in the streets. That even though the law may allow you to do so, you do need courageous, thoughtful, and thorough prosecutors to go and do the oath and charge these cases where appropriate, and not charge cases when it's not.
And you mentioned the case of Laquan McDonald, which captured the nation's attention a few years ago, and so tragic and so outrageous. What do you see now, having served in the office, as the most pressing criminal justice issues that Chicago is facing and Cook County is facing? And what have you been focused on in terms of your outreach to voters during this campaign on criminal justice reform?
Yeah, I came into office in 2016, which was another big year in the country in talking about police accountability and justice reform. And at the time, Chicago had, much like we're feeling now, a horrifically violent year with gun violence. We saw hundreds of people who were murdered, thousands of people who were shot. And yet the public was crying out for not just solving for violence, but the brokenness of our justice system. In a city like Chicago, where we have such rich communities, our jails, 86% were African-American and Latino. Our juvenile justice system, 90% of the young kids there, African-American and Latino. So the overrepresentation of Blacks and Latinos in our justice system, again, not for these things that keep us up at night, but for people who were too poor to pay their traffic tickets, who had their driver's licenses suspended, people who were being arrested for petty retail theft. When I came into office, despite that horrifically violent year, most of our prosecutorial resources were going after retail theft, shoplifting, and people who had drug abuse issues. And so for me, the way that we address violence, that is my most pressing issue right now as a prosecutor, is to not spend our very limited resources going after those who don't pose a threat to our public safety, and really focusing on those who do and calling attention to the racial disparities and the structural racism that exists that allow for so many people who aren't a threat to be caught up in our system. So my priorities have been around bail reform, reducing people being in jail because of their impoverished states. My priorities have been around dealing with the crisis of substance use disorder and not criminalizing people for having an addiction or a mental health issue, and righting the wrongs of the past. We were the wrongful conviction capital of the United States, the false confession capital of the United States. In my tenure, we've vacated the wrongful convictions of over 100 men and women just in the last 3.5 years. We cannot have people believing in the credibility of our institutions if we allow for them to harm communities and do nothing to rectify that.
Wow, Kim, that's really powerful. You know, I want to see if I can pull George into this as well. So, George Gascón, you are running for Los Angeles District Attorney. Could you also say a little bit about what role progressive states attorneys and district attorneys play in the fight to hold law enforcement accountable? And why do you think it's so important to elect progressive candidates in these positions?
No, absolutely. And first of all, thank you so much, Senator Warren, for your support, and for Warren Democrats and Secretary Julian Castro for your assistance and your support with People First. Is really meaningful to us. I agree with Kim. You know, this work has national import, and having the support of national leaders like yourself really makes a difference. But why is it important to have progressive prosecutors in places like LA and you know, state like California? First of all, LA County is the largest district attorney's office in the country, about 10.5 million people. And what happens in LA has a tremendous impact throughout the entire state of California. I mean, if you look at the death road in the state of California, most people think, well, California has to be so progressive, but we have over 700 people on death row in California, and 1/3 of those come from LA County. We have thousands of children that get prosecuted as adults every year out of LA County. We continue to prosecute the mentally ill. If you look at our jail, which has the largest county jail in the country, nearly 50% of the people in there are people that have a mental health problem. And we know, science clearly says that a concrete box is not going to fix mental health, but we continue to do that. We continue to criminalize poverty. People that are often they are houseless and they're out on the streets, and you have prosecutors continuing to prosecute people for offenses that are really driven by poverty and the fact that they don't have a place to stay. Police accountability. You know, I know this is the horrendous death of George Floyd obviously brought this to the surface. But the realities for many of us, like Kim and obviously you guys as well, we have known this has been going on for a very long time. And it is prosecutors, as Kim talked about, is looking for a way where it is appropriate to prosecute a case and to make sure that law enforcement understands that they're going to be held accountable. Now, in my county, you have a county where there have been 600 police killings in the last 7 years, one prosecution. So the import of having a progressive prosecutor is it goes across the board. It's environmental justice, is holding police accountable. It's holding prosecutors accountable themselves. You know, all this comes to the table.
Well, that's a powerful stat. And it makes me ask, there have been Black Lives Matter protests in Los Angeles over the last few months. How do you think that Los Angeles and California can lead at this moment? What are you running to change?
Yeah, and again, I mean, this is one of the things where Black Lives Matter have been protesting the current DA since 2017 for the very reasons that I mentioned earlier. But it's true. Lately, there was about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, 10,000 people in front of her office. What is important? Well, let me start with ending cash bail, right? We know that about 50% of the people in our jail are there because they are too poor to pay cash bail. They are being, in essence, told you're guilty until proven innocent because they have to stay in jail because they cannot afford to leave. So that will be something that in the use of cash bail. We're talking about, again, prosecuting children as adults. We know science tells us that our brain is not fully developed until we're 25. And yet in LA County, we're caging 16, 17-year-olds, sometimes 15-year-olds adults, ending the death penalty. We know the death penalty is broken, but yet LA County continues to put people on death row. It's holding law enforcement accountable. It's focusing on survivors of sexual assault. It is holding public officials accountable, taking care of our environment. These are the things that really drive me, and this is what I look forward to trying to do if I get elected in LA.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, George. Let me just bring Jose into the conversation. Now, Jose, you just won your election in a landslide, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that you were taking on an incumbent. You won that primary in a landslide. This is Travis County, which includes Austin. So it's a county of over 1 million people now, well over 1 million. What does that mean for the future of criminal justice reform in Travis County, and what do you think it signifies in terms of criminal justice reform for our state of Texas?
Secretary Castro, it's so good to be with you, and I'm so grateful to you and Senator Warren for your leadership, not only on these issues, but in our race. There is no doubt in my mind that we would not be on the cusp of fundamentally reimagining our criminal justice system if not for your leadership and engagement in our race. You know, Secretary Castro, you know as well as anyone that the state of Texas has not exactly been a beacon for justice in our country. And in fact, the state itself has perpetrated gross acts of racism under the color of the law almost since its birth as a state in this country. But we also know that it doesn't have to be that way, that there is the possibility for a new Texas to emerge in this moment. And because of the incredible courage of regular people in San Antonio, in Dallas, here in Austin, in Travis County, we have the opportunity to see an Austin and a Texas that leads on these issues and that leads on ending cash bail, that leads on ending our failed war on drugs, that leads on investing in working class people and people of color, that leads on lifting up working class people and people of color instead of locking them up. And I am just so grateful to have the opportunity to try to bring fruition the aspirations of so many people in our communities who have been demanding them.
Absolutely. And yes, Senator, I just want you to know that Jose is a San Antonio guy. In fact, his mom was the superintendent of the Edgewood Independent School District. You may remember that was a school district that was involved in the 1973 legislation on whether education is a fundamental right and the financing of school districts in Texas. And the one that my brother Joaquin and I started our schooling in, and my dad taught in for 26 years. So many folks are very proud of Jose. Just one quick follow-up. You've talked a lot about reimagining justice. You know, talk to me a little bit about what that looks like. What would your first couple of steps be to do that?
Well, for 400 years in this country, we have been sold this lie that what public safety is locking up as many Black and brown people as we can. That if we would only do that, that would make our communities more safe. But we know that's not true. We know that what public safety is a good job. We know it's access to healthcare. We know it's good schools to send our children. And so it is time to pull back the rug of our criminal legal system that has weighed on our communities for so long. We are going to end on day one the prosecution of low-level drug offenses in our community. And as a starting place, I've been very specific about what that means. It means possession or sale of a gram or less, because as George said, as Kim said, locking people up is not how you address substance use. We are going to end the cash bail system here in Travis County, and we are going to hold law enforcement officers accountable when they kill or harm members of our community. We have so much work to do, but our community is ready.
Oh, this is terrific. Thank you so much, Jose. You know, I'm reminded when I listen to you, when I listen to George, when I listen to Kim, that you all have real plans, and that when you have the power in office, as Kim has already started doing, you make real change. This is how we make our system work better, how we make it work for everyone. I just want to thank all of the Warren Democrats who've joined us, the People First Future endorsed candidates for being here today. It's great to speak to all of you, and I'm so excited to have the chance to support your campaigns. Before we close, I'm going to pass this back over to Julian to talk about how folks can get involved and help these fabulous candidates win in November. Because remember, we're going to make each other stronger in these fights. That's how we win, and that's how we make real change. Julian, back to you.
Thanks a lot, Senator, and thank you again for your leadership on all of these issues and for bringing us together tonight. I just want to let folks know how you can help these great candidates. Whether you live out in LA or Chicago or Austin or not, you should be seeing up on your screen their websites. For those in the LA area or anywhere, you can help George Gascón in his race for LA District Attorney by going to George Gascón, the George Gascón volunteer link, which is up on your screen. Same thing in Chicago for Kim Foxx to win her reelection as state's attorney for Cook County. We have the volunteer link there. And for José Garza in Travis County, which includes Austin, Texas, that volunteer link is there. It's for Kim, it's kimfox.com. It's georgegascon.nationbuilder.com/volunteer. For Jose, it's josefforda.com. And I hope that you'll also check out Warren Democrats at elizabethwarren.com/endorsements and People First at peoplefirstfuture.com. And thank all of our candidates for your leadership and for putting out there a bold vision for change when it comes to making sure that no matter who you are, you're treated the same by law enforcement and that we reform our criminal justice system. All right.
Let's get this done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator, Secretary. Really appreciate it. Kim, it's always great seeing you. Jose, very nice to meet you. Look forward to working together.
Likewise, George. Thank you so much.
Thank you.